Hello and welcome to Daily Records, and we're wrapping up all of the original British albums or original albums by the Beatles with the final album, Let It Be, released on May 8th, 1970. Now this is the final release by the group, the 12th album by the Beatles, and it came out about a month after the official breakup of the band. Now, it was a big hit, like everything else the band had done up to that point. And it was the soundtrack to a movie by the same name. But it didn't quite start out that way. So this is kind of a convoluted release, and I'll tell you why. Back in early 1969, the band got together and were going to make an album, and they had got together in this Twickenham Film Studios, a big, huge, cavernous studio, and they brought in a film crew with Michael Lindsay Hogg, director, and they were going to record or film the Beatles making an album. What essentially happened was Lindsay Hogg got footage of a band in the process of breaking up. They weren't getting along. Yoko again was a presence and was getting on just sort of getting on everyone's nerves just by being there. Paul was really taking a strong leadership of the band. George unhappy, and Ringo he was Ringo. He was there, but you could just see the look on his face. He just was not in a good place. I think they had just grown tired of being the Beatles and tired of being together, and so it's a really depressing affair. The movie has never really officially been released by the group in recent years. There's no official DVD release of it, and so it's become bootlegged and sought after. And so what happened was they recorded hours and hours and hours of song fragments and tapes and different things. And so they got together with Glenn Johns, and who was a great rock producer at that point, and never could quite get it together. And so eventually John Lennon kind of handed the tapes over to Phil Spector, famous American producer, and said, do what you will with it. He added all these strings and orchestrations and vocals, much to the chagrin of Mr. McCartney. So he put that sort of Phil Spector sound on it, and McCartney just wasn't happy with it. He thought, this was supposed to be a basic sort of rock and roll album. And so more discontent. Famously, the album was released many, many years later, back in the mid-2000s, as Let It Be Naked, where they stripped all that Phil Spector production and presented the songs in their format. But Phil Spector notwithstanding, the honest truth is they really weren't the best performances of these songs. Now, there is some great songs on here, like the title track, Let It Be. Two of Us, a beautiful McCartney and Lennon duet thing. The Long and Winding Road, another classic McCartney ballad. Get Back, which was a good rocker. So there's stuff there. It's just that the performances were kind of rough, and they weren't ever really meant to be studio released recordings, and so they were problematic to begin with. So Phil Spector was basically handed just this pile of unfinished material and said, here, present an album out of it. And so I'm not going to just point my finger at Phil Spector and say it's all his fault that this album's not any better than it is. To be frank, this album's not any better than it is because the performances just weren't any better than they were. So, could it have been a better album? Most certainly. Is it a terrible album? Not at all. It's a fine album in and of itself because it's the Beatles and it has, that personality, that carries it through. And so, a lot of people like to look at Abbey Road as sort of the final album, and I understand why. just because of the problems that that this album was and what it presented and what it became. But as a collection of songs, which is what an album is, this album is just fine on its own. So, you know, let it be. Maybe not the way the Beatles wanted to go out, but a decent enough affair, and kind of makes you wonder what would have become of it. But we're going to continue on for the rest of July. We're going to talk about Beatles, other Beatles albums, solo Beatles albums, and things of that nature. So stay tuned. We're not done with the Beatles by no means. But like, comment, subscribe, share, follow me on Instagram and Twitter. It's TommyBurton75. In the meantime, I will definitely see you all again tomorrow with another Daily Record.